Good morning and welcome to the Daily Stack. Today is Wednesday, 5/6, and we have a big week this week. It's been Mstr earnings, which has been very interesting to listen to last night. We have the Bitcoin ATM ban. And for those that were on X last night, gave a little preview of one of my most interesting conversations that we had in Las Vegas with Adam O'Brien, our esteemed guest today. They are running Openclaw locally for their business, keeping data in-house, not sending it out to the external models, especially not to an external party or country like China. I thought it's fascinating. I don't know a ton of people that are like seeing everything on the timeline. There's a lot of content around Openclaw, but like not a lot of trust is built up with what's actually being done. So it's cool to hear people actually able to implement it and stay focused. It's so hard to stay focused these days. Bitcoin is tapping on 81,600, so we're generally bullish right now as well. We feel like we're past the doldrums. Halston, how are you doing, my esteemed co-host?
I am doing fantastic, doing so well. Happy to be here and happy to have Adam with us today.
Yeah, Adam, how are you? Good morning.
Yeah, good, man. Sun's shining. I'm above the ground. It's a happy day. And yeah, I don't know what how you want to dive into it, but we're on the cusp. We have this like vision for this like supercomputer running locally. We are also using Openclaw, like cloud-based or whatever. So I think they're actually going to work together in the short term, but I think eventually everything trends local in the AI race. I think it's so fascinating. And then it's been fun, man. It's cool.
Yeah. So for the audience, and Openclaw has been huge on X, and people have been following the journey since like January, like late January, I believe was like really when it took off. And the whole concept is around, for those not as familiar, is having a harness. And a harness is essentially a way coming in from just prompting ChatGPT, prompting an LLM to like answer questions, and you're putting context into the model, and it's putting out like a good, these answers are just getting better and better and better, is building processes and cron jobs, which are just like scheduled tasks. And so instead of having these prompts where you go in and you trigger the action, Pete Steinberger and others have built these harnesses that allow you to really build processes that hopefully improve your life or also your business. Easier said than done. I think that a lot of what we've seen is people are excited about Openclaw. They're like, this is super powerful. This is an amazing concept. They have heartbeats, which is basically just every hour, every 30 minutes, or every time limit you set, it's going to wake up and say, what do I need to do? Or what are the processes that I need to like go poll and check for? And then you take where Anthropic, centralized company that has their own software platform, because it's centralized, it's very easy because you don't have all these like variables, you don't have all these settings that you have to put in place. But for the average user, it's very straightforward. They can achieve a task, right? So the challenge has then been, as Anthropic gets better and better, is how do we make the open source? How do we make this custom way of doing it through Openclaw and managing your own models and managing your own processes as easy as the easy consumer option, which is going to be using ChatGPT Direct or Gemini or Anthropic. So would love, Adam, I think, really to dive in on how you started, like how you started with the Openclaw, and then what maybe you learned along the way that took it from just installing it to actually getting repeatable processes that people can do. Because I think that's the thing that people need to start with, like one good process of like, take this off your plate, go scan Twitter, go scan the internet for the latest news in your industry, and then send me an email every morning. Like one thing, because so many people we talk to on the on the show or the timeline are always just like battling updates, and they're not actually getting output.
Yeah, I think that is a trap. I mean, lots of people think a morning brief is like the end all be all of AIs, and I found I started using Openclaw I think in January. Just kind of became infatuated with this concept of I'm like I'm non-technical, meaning I don't really write code. I can, but I don't, because I'm not very good at it. And what that means is the ability to speak to computers who can program is like awesome. And so being able to do that really fascinated me. And then also having the ability to, as you said, schedule tasks and things that would happen on repeat was also very interesting to me. I will say, I don't think local models in the short term will ever be as good as the centralized models just because of the decentralization effect, right? Decentralization is, if you look at like the speed and security scale, it's like decentralization is far, they're kind of in polar opposites, right? It's like if you want things fast, you kind of have to centralize, which kind of move things down the spectrum away from security, and then vice versa. And so I think that probably local models are continually going to be behind where the current models are, but a local model today is better than the latest centralized model was 6 months ago, even maybe 3 months ago. And I think the delta gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Taking Anthropic's models, Opus 4.7 is slightly better than Opus 4.6, but that difference was nowhere near what Opus 4.5 was to Opus 4.6. And so the models are getting incrementally better, and that the incrementals will be less and less, kind of like a halving, right? There's a lot less Bitcoin that comes into circulation in Epoch 7 compared to Epoch 2. And that's kind of just like diminishing returns or whatever you want to call it at the end of it. Whereas the local models are able to take the reasoning, the benchmarks that exist in, current Opus and build on it right now, and then open source it and distribute it. And having that run locally is, I think, where the fruit lies. So yeah, having the mix of both those things has been important. But for me, like, I don't find morning briefs overly helpful. I've got enough data and info flying my way that I didn't really necessarily need more. What was really helpful is changing my mindset from, so two things for our team. It's primarily, what do you want to do in 5 years, and how do we compress that to 6 months? And so thinking about ways that we can be thinking differently. That's a fundamental shift, right? That's not like just work faster. It's like, no. This is a fundamental difference in how we work. And so shifting that mindset over the last few months has been amazing. And yeah, we're flying right now. We're shipping in weeks what we couldn't have shipped in quarters before. It's absolutely remarkable. And I should note, some of it's with Openclaw, but some of it's also just with, models, like just using codecs on the computer, not through the harness, not through Openclaw. And so learning when and why to use those. That's kind of one side. But for me personally, not the team, anything I do more than 3 times in a week, I'm just jotting that down and then just working with my agent to do it basically, or to at least take steps off of my plate, and really understanding how the agent works and how to best communicate to it is the right way. Voice notes, like just long, really rambly voice notes are key. Getting all the info down. And then the most successful thing is that I found is giving the agent a clear goal, a clear North Star. It's like leadership 101, to be honest. Understanding, once the agent knows what its purpose is, it does a pretty good job at like prioritizing tasks and things to do, and then even feedback to give.
How do you think that we get the agent to master its job and like what it's supposed to be doing?
I think it's time.
I feel like we've struggled a little bit, but now we're at a point where I'm confident that each bot does its job.
Yeah, I think it's time, and they're not humans, right? But but you can treat them like humans, and they're simultaneous. They do different things better than humans, and so they still have like hallucinations and interesting, random mistakes or whatever. that a human probably wouldn't have. Like generally speaking, at least the people that we hire, like you don't make the same mistake twice, right? And if you do, it's like a bit of a problem. With the AI though, it'll make the same mistake 10 times. But then after 11, it just won't. And so changing that mindset from like, hey, I told you this already, what's going on, to like, okay, let's go over this again. What do we, and then reverse prompting, I think has been the key to my success has been like asking it, what do we need to change in order to prevent this problem from happening in the future, or in order to achieve this solution from happening in the future? And then the AI spitting it out and just kind of working with it. At the end of the day, you still need to be in the driver's seat. But yeah, and then having good checks and balances in place is like really important also. We've seen like hilarious things come out of it. Halston and I especially have seen like some pretty wicked things, like just, not very useful things come out of it. But being able to, I think being able to work with it and understanding that these tools, like it's just a mindset shift. These tools are only ever going to get better. This is the worst it's ever going to be. And when you go into it with that mindset and you realize this is the worst it's ever going to be, it kind of fundamentally changes how you look at things, because you're almost just like, I feel like you push it to the limit and then you kind of like limp along until they get better. And then one day it's just better and you don't really know what or why, but it just is. And I think that's probably the state of building for the next couple of years.
When you said leadership 101, like I want to know, I think the most frustrating thing is when you set something up and then it just makes a mistake 10 times, or it works a month ago. And then now it's like one process, and it's like all you have to do is just do that one process. There's a ton of documentation. There's even goals, but it's so frustrating when it doesn't happen right. Like there shouldn't be that many variables of like how it does it, but you change models or you update, and like everything incrementally changes behind the scenes. And I think a lot of people get frustrated with that. What's been a good way that you've stayed on top of like not getting frustrated yourself and saying, okay, here's how I fix the problem? And you said reverse prompting, like for the average user that's new, trying to set something up, that's running into like that issue where it's not consistent. How do you break it down? Like what's your steps 1, 2, and 3 of solving?
Yeah. Reverse prompting is good. Straight up asking the model, what do you think this best achieves? How does it relate back to the goals that we've talked about? I literally will go, like, if I set up a new agent, we have 5 running at Bitcoin Well. I've set up 3 of them. And when I set one up anyways, I literally go for a walk and just like brain dump down into it. High level. What do I want it to do? What's the single focus, or what's the point of focus? And where I've made mistakes in the past is trying to have it be too broad. Like the reason we have 5 and not 1 is because I found that 1 couldn't do the work of 5, right? We have 1 for marketing. We have 1 for infinite. We have 1 that's just like mine. We have 1 for customer support, and then 1 for marketing, or 1 for product.
Devs.
And then I think we're probably going to set 1 more up for finance. And so it's like, the idea of having just 1 agent kind of go through doesn't work, because they only have 1 soul file, and you can create sub agents, but I found that just harder to control than like I literally have 2 Mac minis sitting beside me, 1 more there, and then downstairs there's like I just got this this basically supercomputer. We're gonna have about 128 gigs of RAM with a pretty high powered graphics card, and it's gonna run just all local models. And so the goal is that the local model runs all the sensitive data, cleans it all up, keep all of that locally impenetrable. This is like the safest way to do that. And then have the scrubbed data be accessible by the agents. That way nothing's going, to the cloud, because the cloud, let's be honest, it's someone else's computer, right? It's like, if Coinbase is just someone else's private key to your Bitcoin, then the cloud is someone else's storage for your info, and the LLM is just someone else's brain for your decisions. And so you want to keep that as tight as possible, and making sure that things stay within the organization, while also at the same time, if you aren't using the best model, you're going to get cooked by someone else who is. And so finding that balance is important. And I think that's like probably a tightrope to walk that most business owners are going to have to continue sorting and finding out. But the cool thing is, you know, I think AI in the next 6 to 12 months will be, you know, the best specialist on your team. And what's really interesting about that is that it kind of like democratizes or levels all the playing field. No longer are you beholden. Like, think about this. You know, you as a startup founder, you don't have access to the person that built Facebook revenue stream, right? You don't have access to like the Tesla engineers building autonomous driving, or like the SpaceX, you know, literal rocket scientists.
Yeah.
But no longer are they the smartest people in the world, which is crazy. SpaceX and some random dude in his basement have the same access to talent as ever before. Now, how you use and qualify that talent, there's going to be a variance there, but you're not going to be limited anymore by the talent you can find. You're going to be limited by the way that you utilize that talent. And so learning how to utilize that is going to be incredibly important, and probably going to be the single greatest differentiating factor of builders over the next couple of decades.
I have a question on just because you're talking about with your setup, and I think there's a few areas we'd love to impact. But you mentioned 128 gigs of RAM. From the hardware standpoint, we've talked about on the show. You know, people get on an X, they follow Alex Finn. You know, he went out and spent 20 grand on Mac Minis, or no, Mac Studios, and Jason Calcanis talking on his podcast, This Week in Startups, that he was like, why would I not, if I'm hiring somebody and I'm paying him 180 grand a year out of like Ivy League school to come work at a VC, why would I not also give them 20 grand worth of like these Mac Studios to make them like, you know, supercharged and super saiyan of employees? So there was this thought, but then models have changed so quickly and people aren't sure of like what to invest on the hardware side. We've seen recently that there is some weight to the concern of getting hardware because Apple has limited the high RAM models that they've had of their Mac Mini. What's, for the listeners, what's kind of your take right now, May 2026, of like how people should be thinking about hardware? Is it fine just go grab an old Mac Mini that's used off of like Facebook Marketplace and wipe it? Or is it maybe smart to go and spend a little money getting, you know, especially if it's your business, spending money getting the most RAM possible on like a brand new Mac?
Yeah. I don't know if it needs to be Mac. Like the supercomputer we're building is not going to be Mac. It's okay. Going to be a Linux-based server. Basically, it's just a gaming computer, which makes it much more accessible and easier to use. I don't think you can order a Mac Studio with 128 gigs RAM anymore. I think they just straight up say not available. And I think that's all over North America. I've been traveling a lot over the last few weeks, and every city I'm in, I'm like always looking on the Apple Store, you know, what hardware is available, and there's just none. You just don't find it. And so, but here's the thing. Again, you have to qualify the cost against the cost of waiting. Right now you can run local on 16 gigs RAM. Like your MacBook Pro can probably run a local model. It won't be the smartest local model and it won't be the best local model, but it can do it. But also your MacBook Pro can run Claude Code or Codex. And so it's like, just balance the two out, right? If you've got, I think there's probably an S curve here where if you've got incredibly sensitive data, you probably have, like Bitcoin Well does, you probably have a big enough business where the 20 grand on hardware is like inconsequential. And if you don't, then grow the business to be that big and then invest the money when it's, you know, financially feasible. Models are only ever going to get more efficient from here. In the history of technology, it has never gotten worse, except of course the moon landing. But that's just the way rockets work. Am I right? So it's like, you know, what are you going to do about that? But other than the moon landing, technology has only ever gotten better. And so I think AI will probably follow that same track. And I think we probably are going to see really good models be able to run on a MacBook Pro, be able to run on low RAM.
Yes.
And so if the cost of waiting, let's say it's 20K compared to 5K, it's like, all right, well, if I have to wait a year for the best model, and if I need to run a local model, first of all, I would ask yourself, like, why can't I afford a $15,000 delta if I need to run a local model, right? Let's really qualify who needs to run a local model. It's probably not many people. But if you do, and that delta exists, then what's the cost of waiting? And really, when you compare this, to your point, against, like, first of all, again, if you're hiring $180,000 a year Ivy League person, like, just buy them a computer, like a good one, obviously, because some other person is going to hire an Ivy Leaguer if that's your qualification as of good, and will. And so it's like, just do that. But also, I don't think that you need that. Like, just use cloud models if you really need to. And like, I token maxed for 2.5 months. It was like, put the Amex down.
Yeah.
Every model on the planet, I want to use all of it. I want to see what actually performs. And we found, like, even little nuance, like, I set up a voice agent to be able to do phone calls. And I found that Sonnet, which is like less than this, like, there's Opus is like the best one, but then Sonnet of Claude did a better job actually making faster decisions than Opus did. Opus made better decisions, but Sonnet made faster. And for this level of phone call, faster was better than better. And
natural,
so,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And then we found that, Codex does a better job with backend code, where Opus does a better job at front end code. And so splitting those two processes up. And we found that, like, Google Stitch design has been really interesting. But then, finding the ways that we can integrate with Figma was challenging. And so, understanding, okay, are we going to change our processes over to Google Stitch, or are we going to use Figma? And then yesterday, I forget what model it was, just directly integrates into Figma. And that was another big advancement. We just had our product meeting yesterday that I heard about. And so it's nonstop changing. Someone in your organization needs to be part of that change. We have an AI committee. We meet kind of bi-weekly, although we haven't had a meeting in a couple of weeks with all the conferences that we've been doing. But it's like, we are all independently looking and trying different models, different tools in our departments, and bringing the feedback back to the AI committee in an effort to kind of centralize it and make sure that we're using the right tools for the right jobs.
Yeah. Like, the side of it that, like, I think for, people ask us, like, Daily Stack, you're about stacking Bitcoin. But a lot of people, like, we get the whole ethos of, in Bend, Oregon, where I'm at, we have a meetup, great meetup. Bo Turner's there, from Abundant Minds, where we met when we're talking. And then you also have, Jersey City meetup, James, that leads that. People talk about Bitcoin the first 5 minutes, but they've also been talking about Bitcoin for like 5 to 10 years, and,
Right.
and so if there's a beginner there, you want to onboard them and give them great resources. And BTC Sessions, has been, a great resource, and Ben was there. There's so much around, like, what we've seen and talked about, that people are looking for new stuff, and they also want stuff that's impactful in their lives. They're not going to be able to, like, just buy Bitcoin and retire. Even people in their 40s and 50s and 60s, they are very interested in breaking away from the state, but they still have a business they need to run. So I think that's why it goes so hand in hand with, running a Start9 or Umbrel, running a node, participating in the Bitcoin network. That's, in the past, was people that were technical. You could go to a meetup and talk about why that's important, but the average person doesn't have the technical expertise to go run it. Now they do. Now you can go to Gemini, you can go to Grok, you can go to, any model and get a pretty good understanding of what I need to do to run a node. But then taking that a step further, it's that level of technical expertise of, here's how you control how you interact with the internet, which is very fundamental in how you think of it. And that leads me to my next question and thought process is, applying these self-sovereignty principles we have as Bitcoiners, as controlling your money, controlling your data, your information, how you present yourself to the world, preventing government overreach. Why is running locally so important? And, like, what has made you guys, really focus in on that, especially for customer data?
Yeah, I mean, for that reason, I mean, it's very intimate how much Bitcoin you own.
Yeah.
It's a very personal thing. And, you know, I know a lot of us don't think about where our data lives, but there's two sides to this, right? You know, we talk about local agents and local reasoning, and those things are very important. But at the same time, I think 99.9% of the internet uses AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure.
Mhm.
And so it's like, you know, where's your database stored? You know, where does all of your data live? And you know, the privacy policies that you read and all this stuff. And so, you know, there's certainly different levels to this. I think if you are deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and you understand the implications of sharing that data, then the pain of setting up a local model probably is worse than is not as bad as the pain of having your data go elsewhere, because you understand the implications and the risk. And so when that pain trade-off is in flux, that's when your that's when your decisions change. And so, you know, I truly don't think that it's harmful to use cloud models if you know, don't have a fiduciary duty to protect your data, unless you value data privacy and stuff. And that stuff is very important to a small group of people. I mean, we see it all the time at Bitcoin Well. Like, the greatest barrier that we have is also our greatest selling feature to some. And it's the fact that we're non-custodial, right? It's the fact that if Bitcoin Well turned off the servers right now, there would be 0 customer Bitcoin lost. And that can't be said of any other platform in America, which is crazy. You know, it blows my mind that we are one really bad power outage away from, like, most American citizens losing their Bitcoin. That's petrifying, right? And the same is and will be true of our employees if we don't start looking at local models on a commercial level, at a business level. It feels like you can, there's so much changing and so much different things happening throughout the market. If you look throughout history, we have seen energy usage universally kind of demonized, you know, bad for the earth, bad for the climate, all this type of stuff. And so all this negative energy was pointed at Bitcoin mining, you know, demonizing Bitcoin, all kinds of FUD, that Bitcoin was boiling the oceans and all this craziness. Now we've seen lots of Bitcoin miners shift this energy usage over to AI, and there, you know, of course, there hasn't been any AI FUD about that. I think there is still some pockets of people that are like anti-AI for climate reasons, but certainly less that are anti-Bitcoin for climate reasons. But the climate alarmists will, you know, try to invoke this level of fear. And if you don't know how to run a local model, when those AIs get throttled and filtered, you're gonna have some problems. And so I think learning this technology sooner than later is probably an important thing. But just start playing with it. Like, I think it's a spectrum and a scale, you know, much like privacy. If you listen to privacy podcasts as someone who has done 0 privacy hygiene ever in their life, it is very overwhelming. It's like, oh my goodness, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I am screwed. That's like the general feeling when you listen to any amount of privacy related content. But you look at it as a spectrum and as what is the next most important thing that I can do in order to improve my privacy, not fix my privacy, but improve my privacy. And then it becomes a lot more digestible, a lot more attainable, and a lot more possible. And so going through that same mindset with AI and local models versus cloud models is probably the right move. You know, what is my next step here? Well, I don't even have enough hardware. So step 1 is just figure out where to source and how to buy hardware. Just do that. Now it's there. It's like, turn it on and then figure out what the heck I need to do with it. And guess what? Just use a cloud model to do that, right? Or do some Google searching or watch some videos. Like the info's all there. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And if anyone can do it, you can do it. So I definitely think that it's important to have that mindset going in. Is just really understanding this is not something you're going to want to do in day one. But if in 500 days you've made 0 advancements towards that, I think that would be a big foolish mistake, because first of all, the cloud models are all subsidized right now. When that goes away, the tokens are going to be a lot more expensive. But second of all, it's just the right thing to do. It's like the writing's on the wall here. We are moving toward an AI economy. The information economy is evolving, and no longer is it good enough to have a little moat and then expand that. Like the moat of business of IP is basically gone. There is no business on the planet that someone, and there's certain moats, I suppose, like Amazon has a moat, obviously, and like there's certain infrastructure moats, but there's no business on the planet that technically can't be duplicated right now. And so finding ways to solve the next problem as fast as possible is going to be where you need to be.
On the side of the privacy, I think that one thing when we had Efrat Phoenixon here in person, this is 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, before the conference, is that a lot of people, like I think it's really good for you to say that you didn't care, about privacy hygiene, and that wasn't like something that was ingrained early, and that's not something I agree most Americans really know or understand, or like feel the why and the pain of having to do, but they need to be thinking about it now. And the reason is like AI just makes data analysis connections just so much faster, right? So like now cities and governments are paying for Palantir. Palantir's, before AI was even like that big from a consumer standpoint, they were saying Palantir is special because we can go connect this guy with a cell phone calling a guy in New York to someone in the Middle East, and then we can connect this other like action and what's happening in this country, and boom, like we're gonna premeditated terrorist attack, and like tying in these data points together is what makes Palantir. At that time, 5 years ago, Alex Karp was talking about that, CEO. Now with AI, it's like so many tools are available for every government without even paying for Palantir to be able to do that. And what's scary is if they know how much Bitcoin you have, and say if you're in Canada and like in the trucker scenario, like they didn't have that, like they had no like powerful data analysis that fast. But if suddenly you leak out how much Bitcoin you have, and they might say, oh, if you're trying to leave the country, we're gonna freeze all your other assets, your real estate, your IBIT, position that's an ETF, that's your Morgan Stanley or RBC Canada, like wherever you have IBIT held, and until you pay us taxes on that self custody Bitcoin, and they're going to say we have this data showing connecting from this data leak that you hold a lot of Bitcoin, which is scary, right? Like they're going to use that as evidence to like tax other properties that you have or do any other actions. And so even if you hold the Bitcoin, it works against you if the government has that data. So I think
I would reframe that statement. I think holding anything other than Bitcoin works against you because, literally you rent everything against time, maintenance, right? Your house, your car, your whatever, everything you own, your cars, like your collector's cars, your paint collection, your gold collection, all that is rented against time because it erodes over time. And if you somehow figure out the time or the time problem with like, commoditized assets, a REIT or STRC or whatever other kind of like stock that exists or anything that you're not holding yourself, you rent it against the government, because the second you're in bad graces with the government, then they take those things. And so the only thing that you don't rent against time and government is Bitcoin. And I think most people don't think of it that way. And, I would say self-custody Bitcoin never works against you. Holding anything other than Bitcoin and self-custody absolutely works against you. And so balancing that risk over the long term is important. If you're like, I have no plans to leave the country, I don't think my country is going to collapse in the next 12 to 18 months. I think, by the way, is the longest time frame you can possibly think of for a country at this point. I don't think we're thinking in political cycles anymore. I think we're thinking in 12 to 18 month cycles. And so if you feel really confident about the situations in the jurisdiction or whoever has the power to nuke those assets over 12 to 18 months, then there's no risk. But as that time horizon extends, it gets scary. I cannot imagine owning a house and thinking it will be the same rules with the same asset, with the same regulations in 30 years. Like, anyone who conceivably thinks that houses are going to work the same as a financial tool in 30 years to today is just an idiot. They have no understanding at how history has gone or where the government's going, or like any type of reasonable thought process behind how the future is going to look. And I think the same applies for like life insurance and like all the financial schemes that have worked to safeguard assets in 2020 and beyond, or 2020 and earlier, won't work, I think, 2040 and beyond. And understanding that and thinking about what will, it kind of comes down to the old saying of like, possession is 9/10 of the law. And I think that will continue to hold true with your Bitcoin, but now, tying it all together also with your AI, with your models. If your entire business runs thanks to Claude, and Claude, who's subsidizing the entire business, doubled their prices, what does that do to your business? What does that do to your livelihood? It's like, oh, I've got 30 of them, so it doesn't matter. It's like, well, are all 30 subsidized by Claude giving, like, Claude loses money every single time you enter a prompt into Claude, they lose money. I don't think that can go on forever. I think I'm not like a physics major here, but I think the physics dictate that if you burn more money than you make, you die eventually. I think, like I said, I'm not an expert economist. I don't have the fancy paper behind my name, but I'm pretty sure that's the state of the world. And so what are they banking on? They're banking on being able to raise prices, or they're banking on their costs coming down. It's probably going to be a hybrid of both. Can your business survive long enough that Claude's costs come down and that your costs don't go up in order for you to continue in business? Compare that to local model, spend 20 grand on a computer and you will always be not hitting the perfect benchmark, the current modern benchmark. But you probably have the ability to run that forever. And so maybe the process looks like use the subsidized supercharged models to build and then maintain with the local model and understand. And again, just use your AI to figure out and understand what do you actually need to maintain and what do you actually need. Like we're not going to use the local model to build out this super, kind of hot copy of a database. We're going to use the cloud model, and then we're going to maintain that and run that and protect the privacy with the local model. And so figuring out how to use both of them in conjunction is probably the important thing.
Definitely. I want to talk about the ATM ban before we run out of time here. It's been all over the news. You're the CEO and founder of Bitcoin Well, which started as a Bitcoin ATM company. So you are very, very familiar with Bitcoin ATMs. So the Canadian government proposed a ban on all Bitcoin and cryptocurrency ATMs early this May as an effort to combat rising financial fraud. I think they said it topped over 700 million CAD. What do you think about this?
Hang on, just a second on that. This is a crazy stat. So that's the headline, 700 million in fraud. That's total fraud in Canada. Okay. 14 million of that was reported at Bitcoin ATMs. So it's like 14 million isn't zero, but it's pretty close compared to 700. And I think I think just like
crypto.
No, was Bitcoin ATMs.
Okay.
So it's like
wow.
14 million of the 700 that they're stating is through Bitcoin ATMs. I am of the belief here that Bitcoin ATM, if we banned Bitcoin ATMs right now, the fraud number in Canada would change by 0. This is not a Bitcoin ATM problem. This is an education and a fraud problem. This is a problem. And I think too, that like the highest level problem here is that people have absolutely zero confidence in their savings. And we are all ducks like this under the water, trying to stay afloat, moving our legs, kicking our legs at 1,000,000 miles an hour and going like this fast. And so when you're 55 and you see a Facebook ad that says 9 billion% returns with all these crypto tokens, blah, blah, blah. In a reasonable economy with reasonable monetary policy, with reasonable leaders and reasonable people, you would look at that and think, that's dumb, right? You would not be tricked into understanding that. If I see someone tell me that I can take a pill and grow, like I will physically become taller, I know they're lying to me, because I think that's like, I understand how physics and bodies work enough to understand that it's not just like, I'm not just missing some supplement that's going to make me 6 foot tall, right? I'm 5'8" on paper, but I'm actually 5'6" when you meet me. It's this weird thing that happens in real life. But you know, these magic growth pills don't exist, right? Because people are reasonable and smart enough to understand. But we have secluded and kiboshed money so bad that people, first of all, need to make 9 billion% returns just in order to think and survive for 20 more years, and then think that some guy on Facebook is going to do it for them. That's the state of society. That's the state of our financial society right now. And it's deeply and problematic that we live in that world. And so that's problem number one. Problem number two is that we have so little education about what a good fraud prevention, platform looks like. If you guys remember during, I don't know what it was like in Oregon or in California, but in Canada here, you couldn't walk for more than 10 seconds in any building anywhere without seeing a sign about a mask, without seeing a sign about the vaccine, social distancing. We had arrows on the floor. There was signs everywhere. Every third commercial was about some social distance measures, stop the spread, curve the wave, or all the sayings. They had all of it. There's zero of that towards fraud. And it's where's the education? How come we're not investing all this money? I want to see a sign on every bank that's hey, don't give money to Facebook ads. Don't invest in Trader Joe's ARB bot. That's obviously fake. Don't give money to princesses that are sending you nude pictures from overseas. She doesn't love you. It's probably a robot. Where are those ads? Why don't we have people? And then second, sadly, it's mostly old people that get hit by these scams. And I think we need to do a better job protecting the old people. And so, certainly are old people coerced into using Bitcoin ATMs? Yes, there have been at least 14 million of the $700 million in fraud that have. But I think it's also probably gift cards. It's also e-transfers. It's also just straight up cash. It's also bank wires. It's a game of whack-a-mole here with fraud. Banning an industry that is focused on protecting, none of us want fraud. The good operators do not want fraud. And we are among many good operators in the space. Getting rid of an industry that serves a real need, which is providing Bitcoin in the fastest and safest way possible. But then also having an industry that is dedicated to protecting fraud. I think getting rid of that whole industry at the expense of small businesses that rely on the rent and the cash flow, at the expense of the small businesses that see foot traffic come through the doors as a result of it, at the expense of Canadians who have safe and convenient access to Bitcoin, especially in a world where, we get banks blocking the transactions going to Bitcoin well on the platform all the time. Cash is the only way that you can, with 100% certainty, acquire Bitcoin. Your e-transfer, your wire transfer, your Venmo payment, whatever, they're all subject to blocks. Cash is the only certainty. And so I think that's probably the deeper meaning and the deeper purpose behind the ban. And it makes me sad. But I am confident that freedom will prevail because it always does.
So what does this mean for Bitcoin, Will, in all of our ATMs?
Yeah. Well, right now, nothing, because it's just a proposal. And so, we're obviously working with the industry. We're working with, different layers of government to figure out what this is. I think that it's good that the government wants to prevent fraud. I think this is a misguided step, and I'm hoping that we can educate the government to like come up with a reasonable step, because at the same time, all of our customers are going to have to buy Bitcoin somehow. And so that's kind of on the one side of things, is like, there are legitimate reasons to buy Bitcoin that include saving, that include investing, that include money remittance. Like, there's all kinds of good reasons to buy Bitcoin. And so what happens to all of them? But then also, the people that currently get scammed at Bitcoin ATMs will get scammed elsewhere. This helps the problem zero. And so I think Bitcoin Well and the other industry leaders are going to be working to educate and to find the answers to those questions. If a ban does come into place, I think Bitcoin Well is probably uniquely insulated because we own our software and because we've got this online portal. You're going to be able to, unless they take out this, if this is a war on cash and not a war on Bitcoin ATMs, it's a different story. But if it is just a war on Bitcoin ATMs, then, we should be able to fund your account. You'll be able to fund your Bitcoin Well account with cash and then buy Bitcoin that way. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be good. But like I said, I haven't seen a real bill. There's like 3 lines relating to this in the new budget, and that's it. And so, when we actually see the proposals, when we actually see what the bill looks like, which I think we're years away from actually seeing, but definitely, came out of left field a little bit. And I think Canadians as a whole need to really understand this. The key here is education. Call your grandma, right? Even in America, right? Fraud's a problem everywhere. I mean, look at the Bitcoin ATM operators in the States. They're like riddled with it. Some of that coming to light in February. And it's like, call your grandma and your grandpa and your aunt and just educate them. Like, this is a decentralized effort. Stop the spread of fraud. Let's unfortunately, there's no magic medicine that we can just take to prevent fraud. But I do think that we can probably work a lot harder to tell our grandma and our grandpa and our aunt and our uncle about fraud and about fraud prevention, and even give them permission or encouragement to call you if they get a weird phone call. Just like, be that person in your family that people call. Be like, yo, I owe taxes and they're telling me to go to this Bitcoin ATM. What should I do? And you should be cool enough to be like, they're going to come arrest me. They're coming to take my house and all this stuff. It's like, whoa. Just like, be that voice of reason in the life. It starts with you. And I think that we all know someone that has been defrauded. And that should weigh on you. That shouldn't just be something like, oh, it's all good. I wish I could have done more, but oh, well. It's like, no. That's your fault. Like, you should have been better. You should have been the guy or the person in their life that they felt comfortable calling when they are under duress. And the fact that you weren't means that you should be in the future. And so that's my encouragement to everyone right now.
That's good. I mean, that's kind of advice we need, is to encourage people to educate others. And people say common sense, but it's so hard. The lines are blurred with common sense. President of the United States, was it 2 days ago or a day ago, was talking about his 44% return on Intel, as a country. And he's, touting gains, and people are making the joke of like, oh, you're bearish right now. And the president's like hyping up this chart and doing screenshots. But the thing is like, there's this financialization with all these platforms, Polymarket and all these prediction markets are going in and like embedding into, different areas where you can bet on things. And it's becoming this like concept of gaming, but also kind of like gambling in a way on like different world events. But then you also have like, I get messages from Coinbase that's like an email saying, hey, we have this leverage perps. Are you sitting around bored and you want to make 44% like the president just did? Okay, well, start playing perps. and that's a horrible game. Like most people lose. Like the people are, it's easier. I think the stock market's better than than any perp market. In my opinion, I think you can actually predict things of like, okay, this company's a good company and they make revenue, not just number go up and the little token thing. Like, yeah, there's no revenue there. So point being is like, yeah, it isn't common sense anymore. There's no like baseline of how to common sense in a world that's so intertwined with finance and everyday life events. Last question I have for you, Adam, is like, on the side of like, you guys hold Bitcoin. We have you on 21 Rates, our website, as someone that's, more of an operating business than trying to financialize like a amplified Bitcoin strategy. What's your take going in 2026? Are we going to see more people just holding Bitcoin, just businesses holding Bitcoin in a way that doesn't have to be financialized or doesn't have to be a huge run up in the stock, to be a treasury company?
Yeah, I mean, I think investing in Bitcoin is super dumb because when you invest in Bitcoin, you've got an entry and an exit price that you're focused on. The mindset we have to have is saving in Bitcoin. And I think businesses are going to eventually save in Bitcoin. Like, what else would you possibly save in, right? You're not going to save in a dollar that's failing. You're not going to save in, metal that's hard to move and store. You're going to save in Bitcoin. Yeah. And so as we see this transition from, save in Bitcoin or from invest in Bitcoin to save in Bitcoin, that mindset just, again, fundamentally shifts our actions. When I save in Bitcoin, like when you save money, you're signaling that you are trying to be responsible for the future. And when you use savings, you're signaling that you can do more for your future by spending today and building or doing whatever, consuming. You can do more for your future than just simply holding. And Bitcoin just fundamentally blows that paradigm up. You can literally, you can do a lot of things and beat the dollar, right? The dollar is a guaranteed 10% loss year over year. And so you can do a lot of stuff and do better than that. Yeah. Can you do better than Bitcoin over the long term? There's a lot fewer things that actually do better than Bitcoin over that. And lots of them. And so what that's going to do is like level the playing field. It's going to get us out of this growth at all costs mindset as an economy. It's going to shift our mindsets in such a way where the world probably slows down a little bit. And you're going to think a lot more before you spend. You're going to think a lot more before you rush into some kind of business venture, because you're not racing the clock of immoral money that's losing value every day. You are now propped up with this shield of money that is all but guaranteed to preserve value in the future. And that shift of mindset, you would be an idiot to own a business and not protect your corporate balance sheet that way. But also you would be really, really well off to look at your corporate treasury and think, how can we invest and grow in the future? And then again, it's a balancing act. And the ones that are successful are going to be the ones that balance that properly.
Yeah. I mean,
love it.
It's good to hear. We need more examples of people just saving in Bitcoin and not getting too crazy with it. Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure. We want to keep following the Openclaw journey. We're always looking for way agents are used in the wild, especially Bitcoin companies, where it's like the hurdle rate of just holding Bitcoin, or do you pay $200 for this max subscription? I think that's going to be a big question for a lot of people. And I think you can make it worth it if you up-level your career, your personal life with using AI, which we definitely encourage, but also make sure that you're not doing things that don't beat the hurdle rate of Bitcoin, and have that long-term horizon. So absolute pleasure. Follow at Adam O'Brien, at Bitcoin Well, and obviously my host, Austin Valencia, and we will see you guys back in 5 minutes with Noah Breyer from Alefic.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Daily Stack. We are here with Noah Breyer. Laughing. We also have Sam joining us. Let me get him up on stage.
All right.
Go ahead. Noah, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Sam, also good to see you. We took a week off last week. We were at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas. We were actually just speaking a little bit of AI based on a conversation we had, of running Openclaw locally to manage customer data to sites and all of that. So people are starting to actually put in good processes, but for the most part, people are still fighting Openclaw, fighting the AI. There's still a lot to learn for the average person. How are you guys doing?
Good. I wanna introduce Noah because I've worked with Noah. Can you guys hear me now? My mic on here. So Noah was actually the old CEO of Percolate, and he was the co-founder along with James Gross, who we'll bring on another time, but now is the founder of Alephic, AI's first marketing consultancy. And you've done a lot. You've been in AI. One thing I always loved about you is even though you were CEO, you were always still very, very curious. And 10 years later now, it's probably been since we've worked together, we've stayed in touch, and I've always just viewed you as an inspiration and someone always kind of not happy with the status quo, always kind of understanding why something is interesting. You guys did amazing events with Percolate in the past of bringing people together. You guys, James has obviously done a number of things as well. But yeah, super excited to have you on now, talking a little bit about Alephic and this article that you just published too. I thought was very interesting. Kind of the timeline, just because we live in this whirlwind of AI, and everyone that's in it, they always say their head's spinning, right? You always feel like someone else is beating you while you're sleeping. Someone else is building something. But you kind of brought this all down to 5 unique things that have changed the history of AI. So excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's been a while since we worked together, so this is my chance to spend some more time with you.
Yeah, exactly. We'll ask who the NBA pick is here at the end. Noah, NBA guy. Both of our teams are still in it, which is exciting.
That's true.
So I do want to I'll take the first question, I guess, just to keep it going. But you published the timeline of the AI progress yesterday, arguing there's again 5 moments that actually mattered over the last 5 years. Everyone in our audience is drowning in these model releases, product announcements, as I just mentioned. So can you walk us through what inspired that and kind of, if we can bring it up too, but if you want to talk through it from a high level as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I originally put that timeline together last September. Actually, I do an event called Brand. It's brxnd.ai. It's a marketing AI event. Started in 2023, because even at that point, I thought the marketing industry was talking about AI in such a sort of idiotic way, and focused in all the wrong places, and imagining that it was sort of going to all be in the future. So the really nice thing about doing an event every year is that it means that you have this way to look back on kind of what you were thinking. And the nice thing I've got is receipts from the last 4 years, basically, of how I was thinking about the world. And so when I did the event this year, one of the points I've been making to folks since 2022 is hey, these models are amazing. And even at the point in 2022 where we had GPT-3, I was like, you could still spend 5 years just incorporating that into your life, even if the models never got better than they do today. And so when I did this event last September, I was like, hey, I want to look back and I want to kind of understand what's going on, because I feel like when you're in the moment, there's a new piece of news. It's Opus 4.7. It's today, SpaceX made the deal with Anthropic, and, whatever. It's very easy to feel like you're drowning in a world of AI. And there's some people who are like, the open source models. So I just wanted to lay it all out, and, whatever. This is one person's view. I left out a bunch of stuff purposely because a lot of it is noise. It's like the Kimi, I don't know that we need the Kimi 2.6 release when, we had Kimi 2.5, and that was pretty cool. There's little moments. But so I laid out first what I thought were kind of the big moments that were worth kind of paying attention to. So it's Stable Diffusion gets introduced. That's pretty interesting. It's an open source diffusion model that happened, in 2022. You have ChatGPT launch. Obviously, that was a really big one. GPT-4, DALL-E, you have these sort of big moments. But then if you zoom out another layer and you say, like, what are the things that really matter along the way? I think those moments are kind of few and far between. And actually, and this is why I write, is like, now writing this article, I realized something additional, which is when you zoom out and you take these moments that I think are really important, which is like the introduction to the GPT-3 API. So the first time GPT-3 was a GA API was in 2021, November 2021. Then the next is GitHub Copilot is built on top of that API, and that comes out the next year. And what happens in each of these things is you see a step change in basically token demand, right? And those are the things that really matter. It's like the model releases are cool and they're amazing and they enable us to do amazing things. I mean, it's like every day we get new toys, right? And like we all sit downstream. I sometimes joke that like the best place to be is like, you know, you want to just be a hungry hippo downstream of $1 trillion in CapEx, right? Like we just want to eat all the sort of value that comes out of that CapEx, and we want to get a, you know, whatever, Gemini, the next Anthropic model. But, you know, it's really what seems to happen that's interesting is it's not just a model release that causes a step change in demand. It's that like the model gets released that works in a new way, and then somebody figures out a software product to harness that model, and then kind of like culture and the market is open to it, right? And so the next really big one and really obvious one after Copilot launched, I feel like Copilot gets such a bad name now because of what Copilot has become, but that first Copilot product was pretty mind-blowing for developers. Like all of a sudden we had AI in VS Code. It was auto-completing code. You could do all sorts of things. It was pretty incredible. And demand for that product was amazing. And, you know, they had people signing up for that. I mean, it was an incredible product. And obviously ChatGPT comes out. And, you know, the funny thing about ChatGPT that I remember is like those of us with API access, we had all built our own chatbots. Because like it was very obvious that you wanted to be able to sort of have this long running chat. But it was a pain because we then had to maintain our own chatbots. And so all of a sudden ChatGPT comes out and just solves the problem. One of the very funny things, by the way, that happens with ChatGPT even is like, then all of a sudden Copilot usage changes, because I remember I was now going over to ChatGPT all the time to ask for code, because as good as autocomplete was, you actually wanted to like think about these bigger things. Then I think, you know, really the next big moment is not until O1 comes out. And then even that's kind of arguable in that it didn't create really big change in demand. What O1, you know, probably the next real big step change in demand was actually when they released ChatGPT images. If you remember, I think it was last March. And all of a sudden it was like you couldn't get on ChatGPT anymore because everybody
was only last March.
The Studio Ghibli images. But you know, O1 was amazing because what they did with O1 when they launched it, that was the first reasoning model. And they basically, you know, the funny thing there is, again, like the technology, the idea behind reasoning, Google wrote a paper about that in 2022. Everybody was doing this chain of thought thing and they just baked it into the model. But then really it doesn't become a step change until December, right? And that's when we see the Anthropic hockey stick go the other way because of Claude Code. Claude Code came out almost a year ago to the day. So like this is, you know, pretty close to the 1 year anniversary of Claude Code. And what Claude Code did was it harnessed the reasoning model in a new way. It realized that, you know, reasoning didn't just make for smarter responses. It made it much more capable of doing tool calling. And so then, you know, 6 months later or whatever, you know, I think lots of people say it's because of Opus 4.7 that Claude Code exploded. My thesis is that actually what happened is a bunch of people had less work to do in December, so they had more time to screw around. Yeah. And so then all of a sudden everybody sees for the first time, like, I mean, I was trying to scream from the rooftops last June that Claude Code was amazing, and it was amazing with, you know, the Opus that was available then. So, you know, I think that's the real story. And so, you know, I think we all get caught up in the day-to-day. And again, it's like, it's awesome. When a new model comes out, it's fun. I go try it out and see what's possible today that wasn't possible tomorrow. And, you know, I mean, Sam Altman just tweeted last night, I think, like, you know, what are people doing with GPT 5.5 that they couldn't do with previous models? Like, that is really true. But, you know, the inflection points are ultimately going to be the ones where the hockey stick goes, right? Like the, you know, I mean, Anthropic went from 9 to 40 billion in revenue in 6 months, 5 months, you know, something like that, 4 months. You know, I mean, and that's where, you know, that's where the mind-blowing stuff starts to happen. And my thesis of this article is that fundamentally is this result of you know, it's sort of like my answer to product market fit is this like market model harness fit. And I think that's kind of what happens is like, you know, ChatGPT is a kind of harness. Claude Code is a kind of harness. And when these things come together, Openclaw is a piece of that puzzle too. And so, yeah, that's kind of the thesis of that piece. But honestly, you know, a big part of that piece is just my thesis forever has been like, you know, you got to write, you got to put yourself out there. You got to think through these things out loud. And so some of it is just me thinking out loud about this problem.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, that shocked me that images came out only a year ago, you know, basically. It feels like the timeline of AI, just, you know, you're in it and every day feels like a month. Every month feels like a year. It's really incredible.
I know.
And on the side of like not getting ahead of yourself, one thing we learned this year was around, you know, there's so much excitement with these harnesses and Openclaw. We were talking with Adam O'Brien from Bitcoin Well around his local Openclaw setup and has 128 gigs of RAM. And we're talking around, you really can't buy, you know, these Mac Studios or Mac Minis like you could before. They're just not available. And so not everyone can do the same playbook. Also, it might just not be necessary. Like we want to move towards running local models long term because token prices are certainly going to go up as soon as, you know, funding and they tighten up, you know, their economics heading into an IPO. But
I'll take the other side on that one, by the way. But
that's good. We need to learn. Like
the clips. We need the clips.
So my point is just that we need to learn these things, but don't go. You know, people say buy the second version of something, buy the V2 because the V1 is going to have a lot of bugs. So in the same way of having people learn about these things and like do Codex and do Claude and do like co-work, and that's probably what I think is the right way. And then get deeper into Openclaw, but don't go blow a bunch of money on a setup.
Blowing a bunch of money on a setup is a whole other thing. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely. My kind of message to everybody, I mean, whether you know, we mostly work with big enterprises and folks inside. I was with a big enterprise customer on Monday. Like, you know, the message is just like, get your hands on this stuff. It's weird. And like the only way you're going to learn it, you're not going to learn it by reading books. Like you're not going to learn it by reading LinkedIn posts. You're definitely not going to learn it by reading LinkedIn posts. But you know, you just got to get your hands on it. And the beauty is you can get your hands on it. And I mean, even the Openclaw thing is funny. Like you don't need to go buy a Mac Mini to run Openclaw. You can screw around with it. You can buy some used computer. You can get a whole bunch of other things. Like there's lots of ways to play with these things. You know, and I also just, you know, I think like this moment of running these things locally, I think, you know, the local model thing is nice in theory, but, you know, I mean, I have a basement full of computers. I have a server rack downstairs. I have a DGX Spark from NVIDIA, which has a version of Blackwell sitting down there. Like, you know, I got a lot of stuff sitting. And like at the end of the day, though, I still make API calls to models because, you know, you want the very best models are not going to be available anytime soon locally. And the reality is that, you know, like for most of us, it's worth the value in having access to the very best models. And, you know, if you don't want the very best model, then you can get, you know, you can use Gemini Flashlight for, you know, 20 cents per million tokens or something. I mean, it's like it's an incredible model for what it is. And, you know, like the funny argument on these Mac Minis, there's, you know, the sort of like maximalists who want to like run everything locally and make sure that they are protected from the world. And that's cool. I mean, again, like I'm all for just playing with stuff. So I think you should buy a computer anyway, if you can, and just like screw around, learn it for yourself. But my experience personally is like, as much as I try to run these local models and do these things, I just keep coming back because the economics, even if they start to change a little bit, the economics are pretty amazing on what's available. Like there is no open source model that you can run that is, I think, close to the performance. And you know, when you factor in costs on Flashlight, like that is an amazing model and it's super fast and it's not the smartest model in the world, but you know, I mean, like honestly, neither are most of the open source ones. So, you know, I mean, it's all trade-offs at the end of the day, but I think the only real thing that matters is that you're in it. Like the thing I'm shocked by, honestly, just, you know, working with big enterprises is the number of people who aren't curious enough to, you know, never mind running Openclaw, they just like haven't signed up for a ChatGPT account. Right?
I do want to
sort of waiting.
I want to let Sam ask a question here, but just because you just mentioned something that triggered something in my head. Is that the biggest, what do you find? Because you're going in, I won't say who, overall, I think you have like some of the biggest.
We work with Amazon, Meta, Disney, Colgate, EY, PayPal.
So working with those biggest companies, what you just said was interesting. You'd be surprised at how many people just don't get their hands in there. Is that the biggest challenge that you're seeing when you're going into enterprises, actual like adoption of this? And like, talk me through some of the bigger challenges that they're working.
Yeah. So I think the bottom layer is definitely just baseline. You got to play with this stuff. I fundamentally believe I worked for a really long time on trying to figure out the perfect analogy, and I landed on like riding a bike, which is like the most trite analogy, but like it's true. Like I have kids. You don't put a kid on a bike by explaining the physics of bicycle riding. Like you put a kid on a bike by pushing them off and letting them ride their bike, and they fall over a couple of times and they figure it out, right? And that's because the physics, like the physics of riding a bike, are weird. Like none of it makes sense. And AI is like that. It's weird. Like we now all have a computer that can write poetry and like make images and do weird stuff. And so, never mind, like you just have to be on it and in it. And, again, I think inside big companies, that's not, in a lot of organizations, folks wait for people to tell them what to do and how to do it. And it's like, I don't think you can wait on this one. I think you gotta train yourself. And I don't think there's a training. I don't think corporate training, there's a lot of it, even the training when we do it is a lot about just encouraging people to get their hands on it and making them feel confident that like, hey, their question, which they think is dumb, or their use case, which they think is silly, isn't silly. And their question isn't dumb. Like, no, this is like weird. It's confusing. So I think that's the bottom layer, is just like, we need people. Everybody's got to get out there. I mean, it's like I have my 10-year-old on Codex now, like just screwing around. Like I just, like you got to feel it, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think the next layer is just bureaucracy, honestly, inside these companies. I published a book, actually. There's a 1944 OSS field manual on how to sabotage organizations. So it was written, OSS was the precursor to the CIA, and they wrote it during World War II to drop into like Nazi occupied countries to try to encourage citizen saboteurs to like basically screw up Nazi operations without getting themselves killed. And so there's like instructions in there that are like, hey, if you're a janitor at a factory, you should like leave a bucket of oily waste in the corner. And if it happens to catch fire, like that's good. And if it doesn't, you could always throw a cigarette that direction and, like help it start. And then, but the funny thing in this manual is that there's a whole set of white collar sabotage instructions. And it says like, have more meetings, always refer things back to committee. If anybody wants to make a decision, encourage them to slow down. So like nobody gets embarrassed, revisit previously, like this is how corporations operate. And like, I think a lot of what we're seeing with layoffs, honestly, is they're trying to unravel that a little bit. But like, I think that's the next layer of the big barrier is like, the first one is just, hey, you got to get more people curious and just, self-directed. And then the second layer is like, you got to move out of your own way. Now it's hard. These are the most successful companies in the world, right? And some of the most successful companies in history. Like, of course, they are, more risk averse. Like they have a ton to protect. Like, we work with multi-trillion-dollar companies. Like, they're building a company, much bigger than what I could ever imagine. And, I have full respect for like the amazing organizations they built. But like, I think if you look at the announcements, you look at, the Coinbase layoff this week, right? And the announcement for Brian Armstrong, like, it's pretty clear that like something is fundamentally broken in the way these companies are operating, and they're trying to fix it. And AI, I think on one hand, AI offers a sort of excuse to fix some of those mistakes, and they hope that AI also is an accelerant to fixing them. But I think a lot of it is just like, you just got to break through, and it becomes particularly kind of acute in a moment like this, when like the answer is not you spend 6 months planning. The answer is like, you just get your hands in and you start building things, because in 6 months, who knows what the world's going to look like, right?
Yeah. You gotta let Sam get in, break the rust off.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I definitely want to reiterate that, because I think that for the average person, getting their hands dirty is the best advice you could give them, because you can't read a book on this stuff. You could watch YouTube videos on it, but if you stay in the hype cycle and in the news cycle, number one, you're going to get overwhelmed. There's so many different things you could try, so many toys you could play with. But I feel like the more you get your hands dirty and you actually learn how these things work, it gives you discernment to know, okay, this is something that maybe I should pursue, or maybe I should check this out, as opposed to, the never ending flood of, oh my gosh, this industry just got wiped out, or this job just got wiped out. And I feel like that's so important, because people get very intimidated by all of this information that's flowing in 24/7. But if you at least have a base understanding of how it works, not because you read it in a book, but because, to your point, you got your hands dirty, I just feel like education wise, and just anyone, whether it's a business or a person looking to improve their skills, level up in their job, level up in their business, that discernment comes from getting your hands dirty. So I think that's like a really, really important point, as opposed to getting sucked into all these different news cycles and hype cycles, because quite frankly, I mean, it's every day and every week that something new's popping up that's going to change the world in some way, shape, or another. And so in addition to that, you had something really interesting in that article. I read it up. I thought it was a great write-up. And I have a question for you. I'm curious how, you mentioned a couple of things that you could see potentially being kind of like the next big breakthrough, right? The next thing that we look back on is, wow, this was a pivotal point in the development of AI. One of those things was real document collaboration. Now we're starting to see tools like Claude, ChatGPT plug into things like docs, spreadsheets, et cetera. I'm just kind of curious, just strictly your thoughts on what does that actually mean? What does that look like, real document collaboration, from what we have now to where it gets to a point where we might look back on it and say, wow, this changed the way that knowledge work is done. Or even if it's not that dramatic, this was just a big shift in the way that we were able to work with these documents. I was curious if you wouldn't mind kind of drilling into that, what you meant by that.
Yeah, for sure. So I've had a joke for a while that I thought like the ultimate race in AI was between whether the model makers could build a decent word processor, or whether the word processing companies could build a decent model or integrate a decent model. And so to me, it's very simple, which is like, I mean, in any kind of business, like, let's use the Microsoft, whatever, Google, Microsoft, they have the same suite of products, right? You have a spreadsheet, you have a presentation, and you have docs. Right. And let's even just like skip the other two for now and just focus on docs. Like docs are a huge part of how the world works, whether it's Word or Google Docs. Like I would venture to say, 30-40% of like corporate time is spent on a doc of some sort, and I just feel like, I don't know how you guys feel, but it's like wherever these things are, it just is not really collaborative yet. Like it's getting better. And so, one of my big ahas when I started using Claude Code originally was, I was like, oh my God, this is like, I used it in Obsidian. I have this whole crazy note-taking setup. And I was like, oh, now I realize just how uncollaborative ChatGPT and Claude were, because every time you upload a document, you'd have to pull it back down, edit it, or you tell it to do edits. If you remember, like ChatGPT claimed they had like a document editor. That doesn't even show up anymore because it sucked so bad. It's hard to build a rich text editor. That's why there are two of them in the world. Like there are two good, think about it. Like you got Word and you got Google Docs. Like name player number 3. Like they don't matter. And and so to me, what I'm waiting for very simply is like, I'm a Google Docs user, but you say the same for Word, is like, when I'm in Google Docs, I want to feel a frontier model where I'm genuinely collaborating. And when I'm writing, it can be writing and reading. And, when I'm telling it and it's editing me, and like, this is actually collaborative. Like, I don't need to tell it to read my thing. It's actually happening there. And in some ways, in my mind, that doesn't seem like such a hard problem. But, again, it's sort of, that is dependent on, I think that's where I don't count out Microsoft yet in this whole thing, is that like, I think owning that surface is incredibly valuable, right? I mean, that is why Google got into that business too, right? Like owning the surface that work gets done. But I just don't think we've felt it yet. Like, I think like, Claude Cowork and now Codex, like they're cool. It's awesome. But it's still like, even if you've tried Codex in Google Docs, like, it's better than it was, but it's not like we're not there. I don't know. I don't feel it. I mean, and so, and Markdown is not the answer. Like, Markdown is never, like, Markdown is cool. It's great. But like, we need Google Docs and Word, collaborative rich text editing with an AI where I've got an editor sitting there with me, and like, I can chat, I can write, it can write. It's just a part of it. It's building slides. It's building my spreadsheet. Spreadsheets, I think, are actually a little easier. And I think that's probably like the Claude and the ChatGPT they just announced. I haven't played with the ChatGPT Excel extension yet, but like, the Claude extension for Excel is pretty mind-blowing for sure. And that's, but also, it's like writing that spreadsheets are a different function than presentations and docs, because they're all structured data. So it's a much more sort of an easier problem. So that's what I've got in my head, but I don't know. Yeah. I mean, does that resonate with you? Does that seem like, do you have a different experience?
Well, the reason I asked is because I feel the exact same way. And it's gotten to the point where I've tried so hard to get these tools to work with the docs, in particular documents, whether it's Drive or just a doc file. And, I was like, I'm doing something wrong. There's something I'm not doing correct. I've tried Cowork, I've tried Codex, I've tried the web apps, I've tried everything. And it's just so cumbersome and just not effective to where I just don't even try it anymore. I just, any changes that I discussed with the LLM, I go into the actual document and make the changes myself. But it's confusing because I feel like the technology is good enough to be able to do that, but maybe not. So yeah, I was just curious your thoughts, because I feel the exact same way and I've kind of been scratching my head.
What I can tell you a couple of things about this problem. One, I've worked a little bit on doing rich text editors in my life, including when Avi and I were working at Percolate together. Rich text editors, especially web-based ones, are very, very hard to deal with. Like it is an incredibly hard, like a stupidly hard problem. It's just like a million little edge cases for like, hey, the person highlighted and, it needs, and it's all about it being WYSIWYG, right? What you see is what you get. And like, that problem is very difficult. And again, I think that's the reason there are two of them in the world. Like if it was easy, we'd have more. I think if you go back and read the announcements from OpenAI back in the day where they talked about building a document editor, I think they thought it was going to be a much easier problem. And I think it turned out to be a very hard problem. So then that's on one side. On the other side, I think what you have in Google and Microsoft is obviously some of the sort of big, we were talking about bureaucracy before. There's a lot of bureaucracy in there. There are a lot of people who own that product surface and sort of like, making that work in the kinds of ways that you want it to work. There are also a lot of people who use that product surface, right? It's like, you can't mess up Google Docs for the day. You can't mess up Word for the day. So, and I think it's hard for the third-party folks to sort of deeply integrate. I mean, it's like just one of the ones I know for a fact is like, there's no API in Google Docs for doing line-level commenting. And so if you want, like I have tried many times to build like, hey, I want to build an editor that can do line-level comments on a Google Docs or move into suggest changes or whatever. That API doesn't exist, which means now you need to go into the browser. And so once you're in the browser, then, then it gets more complicated and it gets more cumbersome. And, as good as computer use is, and, I think Codex computer use is a real step up. Like, I thought the Claude extension for doing browser was pretty cool. But, I think what they've launched with Codex computer use is amazing. And I've moved most of my work over there now. But it's not native. It's like, it just doesn't feel good enough yet. And so somebody's got to solve that problem. And yeah, I mean, I do sort of like, I continue to not count Microsoft out for that reason, is like owning Word and PowerPoint is pretty valuable. And if they can get their act together and figure that problem out, that is an incredibly valuable problem to solve.
Do you think companies will like maybe newer companies? I know you're doing this with the big corporations now, but like an AI first company, and where my head's at with that is thinking about like all the knowledge sharing. It's like from day one, everything needs to kind of go into the AI, and taking a level up from that. I'm thinking about what you were saying, where if I'm as a salesperson, I get a question from a customer, it already kind of almost auto populates that in my email response. Or taking that a step further with like 11 labs and like cloning me, could I clone my face, and just make a much better version of me where you don't need to pay a sales engineer to join me on a call to answer those questions, because I now have that knowledge base in my head and I could just like, is that realistic, or is that like,
yeah, dude, that is very, I mean, like we've built a lot of that. I haven't built the Avi clone yet, but like that's next. Instead of hiring a sales team, I'm just gonna have a bunch of Avi clones. No, I mean, like we have built, this is something I've actually built at Alefic, is a whole bunch of tooling for operating the business. And, you know, we operated, you know, when we were at Percolate together, I think sales org was probably 100 people. So, you know, and we had big Salesforce operations. It was kind of pre-call recording, so we didn't have call recording. But now in a world of call recording, so, you know, we don't have a CRM really. I mean, we still technically have a HubSpot, which we really just use to move the deal board around, just because I haven't gotten around to putting a deal board into this system yet. But like what we have is we record every call. Out of those calls, they get run through the system. The system pulls out next steps. It pulls out all of the other pieces that it needs. It researches all the people who were on the call. It writes a summary. That summary goes into Slack. It's got, if it's a sales call, it runs Bant on the sales call. And then it also gives a like yellow, green, yellow, red on the call. So, you know, it's like, I don't need to read all the greens, but if a yellow or a red call comes through, I go and read it. Then from there, you know, we do weekly status on them. You know, we can write proposals off them by just, you know, there's a whole skill. So as part of that system, we run a bunch of sandboxes. So you can talk to it from Slack too. So you can say, hey, I need to spin up a new proposal for Avi, and like go look at all the calls we had and go research the company and then spin up with a proposal. So yeah, I mean, I think all this stuff is here, and you know, I mean, the specifics of like, hey, I want to, you know, the voice cloning, it's obviously possible. I think just thinking about sort of how you want to integrate it. But, you know, I mean, it's pretty wild what, I mean, this is all tooling we've built internally. Like I can DM, if I DM the bot, it then via DM, it has access to my email, my calendar, all my drive. It has access to everything, has access to all my private Slack chats. So I can do everything. And, you know, like we just talked about, it can't, when it does that proposal, it can't, the best it can do is it can take it and it puts the full version into Drive for the first time. Unfortunately, once it's in there, it's not so good at editing for all the reasons we just discussed. But yeah, man, I mean, this is the way it is. And, you know, I think where I think it's amazing is like, this is all the stuff that salespeople hate doing anyway. Like you know, it's like salespeople just want to go talk to customers and prospects and go close deals, right? Like, you know, you don't want to fill in Salesforce. I can say for a fact.
Well, those field reports, I hated those.
Yeah, and so like this just offloads the whole thing, and you know, we run on Google, so you know, I'm not currently doing. So we sync people's calendars every day. We have a daily brief of all the meetings that you have, but like one of the things I've got on my roadmap for that tool is to start writing the pre-meeting notes for you to send out to the customer. You can imagine then they'll just start getting sent to customers, you know, pre-meeting automatically. Yeah, it's all there, man. I mean, it's just a matter of like wiring and prioritizing, and, you know, like I'm prioritizing the work that, you know, we have for our business. But, you know, I think part of the challenge is just, you know, I think for big companies is they look at this and they're like, because it can do everything, they don't do anything, you know? And when you're a business like ours, you know, I mean, we've grown a pretty big business. We're growing it faster than we grew Percolate, but, you know, we're still 20 people, you know, like, but from the ground up, we've built it. Like we just onboarded somebody, and the entire onboarding happened over Slack with the AI. Like he just asked questions of the AI the whole time. And, you know, again, that was awesome for him. He didn't need to be embarrassed about like not knowing something, or, you know, and then we also know all the conversations that are happening, so we can layer that back into the docs for onboarding. Like it's amazing, man.
Yeah.
What's been your rich text editor of products you've thought about building, and something like Calendly, people would think, oh, I can one-shot Calendly with 4.7, but then they get into it and it ends up being harder than you expect.
I wouldn't say I really have one, in that, like, mostly because I have a pretty good sense of which products are going to be hard, and I probably avoid those. I will say this week, last week, I one-shotted Whisper
Oh,
flow.
yeah.
Because I wanted to try the new Codex Mac OS plugin, and so I just canceled Whisper yesterday. I built my own version. It runs via Grok with a Q, super fast inference, which has a version of Whisper that runs at like 1,000 tokens a second or something. And so I built that. I just started distributing it out to the team. I made it look exactly like I wanted to make it. It's even got the thing I've been working on this week for it is it does a voice interview with you using Gemini Flash Live at the beginning. Because, you know, the thing you really want is like, you want to make sure it spells your name right, it spells your company right, it like gets all the things. So it does an interview with you at the beginning. It's like, what's your name? How do you spell it? Are there any, like, do you have any other names? Like, you know, tell it my wife's name, my kid's name. So like, if I say them, they'll always spell it right. Company names, like my conference brand, it's all caps. So like tell it, and it's spelled BRXND. So I like tell it that. So it's all this stuff. And so it does the voice interview at the beginning, and then it stores that as a set of preferences that get passed with the prompt. So I don't know, man, I started that project last Wednesday and I canceled Whisper on Monday.
Avi needs that. He's a big voice note
Go
guy.
through all of our subscriptions and start building them.
I'll send you the app, Avi. You can try it out. You just plug a
Yeah,
Grok
yeah.
in.
He's a voice note guy. He could use it. Sure.
I definitely need that. What else did I want to hit on? This was big from yesterday. The NVIDIA news. Did you see this with the GPUs in your home?
Yeah, I didn't dig into it too much, but I saw it.
Is that a reality, do you think? I know you just said you didn't read into it too much, but basically what I read, so NVIDIA and Polte Group are helping this startup put mini data centers into the homes. And so I was reading they're like going to build them into the walls themselves.
Yeah,
so,
man. I think this is pretty interesting. You know, it kind of reminds me, Elon made this point about Tesla having all this energy capacity because they have all these superchargers everywhere, and like they're sitting and, you know, not being run, and power's at a premium, right? But, you know, he's got these things running all over the country. So I think we're going to have to find a lot of clever solutions for working around the kind of bottlenecks that we're going to run into, right? You know, and the ultimate bottleneck is going to be energy. And so, you know, you got people, you know, they've got solar, like you got a lot of excess energy. Like there's a lot of interesting opportunities that are sort of ultimately going to exist there. And I think, you know, I mean, I don't know about this one in particular, whether this is sort of, there's something real or not, but I do think the general notion that we're going to have to find more creative solutions, you know, it's real. Like, I mean, I don't know if you just saw the news about SpaceX and Anthropic, but like, you know, it's all these things. Like there's going to be a lot of kind of unimaginable solutions to these problems. You know, I mean, Anthropic deciding that they're going to, or SpaceX deciding that they're going to, you know, rent all this extra capacity to Anthropic. Like, you know, there's just so much demand for this stuff. James, my co-founder, he wrote a really great piece. You got to get him on to talk about it. And he wrote this like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago.
I read that one. You sent it to me. I thought it was really good.
So it's happening everywhere. I think Morgan Stanley this week talked about it, but like, you know, his piece was basically like, not only are we not in a bubble, but we're in the opposite of a bubble. Like we're in a supply crunch, and that supply crunch is actually going to drive inflation. You know, Apple even talked about it on its earnings call yesterday, the memory prices going up. Like we're going to see it everywhere. Things are going to get more expensive. It's going to be harder to get because, you know, this is such a valuable way to use resources. And so, you know, I think like, I think so. Again, I don't know the specifics on this NVIDIA one. It sounds cool. I'm down to put a GPU cluster on my wall. But you know, I think the broader thing here is like we're just going to have to get creative because, like, you know, we're not going to be able to spin up enough capacity fast enough. Like you can't, you know, like again, it's happening at every layer. And James's piece did a really good job breaking this out. Like, you know, in when you get to chip manufacturing, you get all the way down to these tiny little companies, right? Like, you know, Zeiss makes lenses that go into these ASML machines.
Has been huge recently.
And yeah, I mean, it's like it goes all the way up. I just passed I live in Connecticut. There's a ASML operation here. I think it's R&D. I was just going to stand outside and like clap them on, try to get them going, push
Like
more production out.
Flights.
Just going to go bring them lunch.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I saw Kevin O'Leary is looking to build in Utah, double the size of Manhattan. You just think about how big that's going to be. And they're going to double the energy that Utah has, which is just like, it's crazy. I mean, watching in the stock market too, you can kind of just see that where the money is going to be flowing and where the bottlenecks are. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think the one though is, and nobody seems to have a really good take on it, is the energy one. Like nobody, I think it's, you know, sometimes it seems like it's the biggest bottleneck, and then it does seem like there's a lot of excess energy. So it's like, you know, obviously like all those, you know, again, Tesla superchargers is top of mind. Like, you know, they're sitting there with 1 or 2 cars. Like there's a lot of capacity there that could be used. And so, yeah, I think the real thing is like, you know, this is the markets fill in the gaps, right? Like that's what companies are going to get built, and everybody's sure, you know, there's like AI is going to eat everything, but like, you know, I don't know, markets create markets, right? Like this is the history of the world is, you know, new problems emerge, and those problems need to be solved, and new companies get started to solve those problems. And then those companies become really big. And so, you know, I'm optimistic about the creativity of folks in solving these problems.
Yeah. One thing, shout out to our friend, Danny. He's very bullish on USA rare earth. I've held MP Materials for a long time, the largest rare earth name in the US.
It was a SPAC.
Yeah, it was. Don't recommend SPACs at all, but
I was one of the winners,
which is good. We like talk about like you can make more energy. Like we need to make, obviously, you know, solar energy more effective, more cost efficient, and there are some really promising technologies, but there's certain minerals that are, I think, as the world becomes bifurcated with like East and West, and like China's going to want to hold all of theirs, that's going to be a bottleneck. I think we'll figure out energy from like a solar perspective first before we figure out how to replace, you know, things like lithium, you know, with the batteries, and, you know, other like rare earths that are involved in all the processes. So not financial advice, but start to look at those where there's not even a way to really scale it. Like we can scale more mining, but how much supply and capacity is there is, we're not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's opportunities, I think, up and down the stack. There's you know, the challenges are, a lot of people thinking about this right now. The market's challenge is like, you know, so finding one that somebody hasn't thought about yet. But, you know, I mean, I think the thing people are underestimating on all this is just the inference drives inference, right? So it's like, you know, what we see is, I mean, you know, this is what we're talking about. You guys have felt it, is use these tools. Not only do they keep getting better, but you keep getting better at using them. And then you find new reasons to use them, and then those get better. And like, it keeps piling on itself. And so it's like, you know, I probably use 10 times the tokens. I've got one of these OpenAI sent me. That's my, they sent me my 10 billion token platform.
That's awesome.
I've never even seen one of those. Look at that.
Yeah, that's pretty good, man.
We should have started the show with that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We got a YouTuber here. It's Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think I have long believed that, like, I just think, you know, we're going to continue to see inference just go. And, you know, it's interesting now, you're seeing, you know, the AMD reported yesterday, they're up some crazy amount today.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just like, now we're seeing the same on the CPU side. Again, it's just like, this stuff is incredibly valuable. And, the more people use it, the more that they want of it. And I just I don't know where that stops. You know, I don't see the sort of the point in the future where now, you know, again, like I don't totally disagree with you that, you know, ultimately these are subsidized tokens right now to some effect. But I mean, even with the subsidies, like the reports on the Anthropic gross margins are pretty amazing. It's not like they're running a charity over there. And I don't know whether Google is subsidizing, the Google, again, Flashlight, I think is the model to look at. I wrote a piece a while back about the dollar models. I think that's kind of, to me, when you sort of break out the models, you have the frontier models, and there's only going to be a couple companies who can really compete in that space because it takes so much money, right? So you have, it's Google, it's OpenAI, and it's Anthropic, and maybe Grok will come. Although I don't know what this sort of new announcement about the relationship with Anthropic means for the future of their in-house models, but the whichever one of those you use, we all have preferences, I'm sure, but they're all pretty amazing, right? And then I think, the biggest other space I find myself using a lot is this around $1 per million token in and out. And, Gemini Flash was the answer there. And then they released Flashlight. Flashlight is a quarter the price of Flash, and it's still amazing. And I don't think they're subsidizing that. They don't have I think they're just, they have, because they've built TPUs, they have all these other things. They figured out a way to serve these things incredibly cheaply. And I don't know, it's pretty amazing what you get out of that thing. I'm blown away by, I keep testing stuff thinking it won't work, and then it just keeps working. I'll give stuff, there's some stuff where I run it and I'll eval it against Gemini Pro, and it'll run, the eval will do better on Flashlight.
It's a good takeaway for the audience. Gemini Flashlight. I haven't personally experimented.
You don't use it. You don't need it for most things, but if you're doing anything at scale where you care about the cost, I don't think you're going to find a better model value than that one.
Who do you think wins in 5 years out? That was the first part of my question, which you answered. Anthropic, Google. Do you think those are the winners? No one's going to be able to catch them. Number one, and then number two, of those three, 5 years out from now, I know ChatGPT, I've been listening to the All In podcast where they're they came consumer first. Now they're trying to get into enterprise. Anthropic was enterprise first, and then Google, I think, personally, I think they're kind of they're the winner in my opinion, just because they have everything baked in, already, and everyone's on Google Workspaces, and you can start to do that. So long term, and they have 20 plus years of LLM data through Gmail and every person's search. The amount of data they're sitting on is insane, I'd imagine. But you're closer to this, so I'd love to hear your
take. This is the $10 trillion question, probably, right?
My Charles Schwab open right now. So
I don't know. That's the cop-out answer is and honestly, just personally, I have bets on all of them. Yeah, I think, ultimately they're all going to do pretty great. I think Ben Thompson had a great piece this week on Amazon and everything coming together over there. It doesn't look like they're going to go hard after building their own models, but, owning all the compute is a pretty valuable piece of the equation. I agree that Google is, in pretty great shape, both as sort of a model maker and as a as a cloud platform. And then Anthropic and OpenAI. I just think I have trouble believing there's sort of other players who are going to emerge in the near term, just because the cost of entry is so high. Again, I'm very curious on this Grok announcement. I think the question here for Grok is there a future for that as a standalone model, or are they going to try to do something else? They now have that option basically to buy. I think we can effectively think of it as they've bought Cursor, right? The sort of $60 billion option to buy it. I just think there's a lot of demand out there. And, I do think ChatGPT, the consumer market seems to be down to ChatGPT and Gemini, right? I don't think there's sort of realistically other players are going to play in there. I'm amazed just talking to not people like us. If you just go out and you ask them about AI, the number of them that are in Gemini, that's their experience. I would just say my only disappointment with Google, honestly, is just Gemini is definitely number 3 for me on the models, on the frontier model side, right? Like I just talked about how great I think Flashlight is for the price to value. But, you know, again, like 90% of my stuff, I'm not looking for price to value. I'm looking for like raw intelligence. And so I'd never go to Gemini Pro for raw intelligence because 5.5 and Opus 4.7 are better. So, but I don't know, man, these are all, it's an amazing time to be any of these companies. It's an amazing time to own a lot of compute. It's an amazing time to have a lot of cash. You know, I mean, like Andy Jassy talked about it this week. This is the Ben Thompson piece. And he talked about, you know, it's like you run a business where you kick off a lot of cash and you're not afraid in investing in things like, you know, I mean, Meta in their earnings call talked about the amount of CapEx going up. Like, you know, if you can afford to spend $500 billion on CapEx right now, you know, it feels like this is the game. And, you know, ultimately, I think, you know, the people who are calling bubble are all asking about the sort of future demand, but that one, I don't get it. Like the demand is, I think the demand is probably underestimated, not overestimated right now, as far as I can see it. So, you know, but I think it's so hard to sort of say which specifically. I think, you know, I think they all seem to be doing pretty well.
Question. So one thing, as we've gotten like more into like vibe coding and like building a lot of tools and we've seen like friends and also like Avi and I and Sean that we work with building these things. And it's amazing. And you create really so fast, but it is getting commoditized, right? So many people can like one-shot things, you know, just come up with a good prompt, boom, you know. It takes a lot of work, obviously, to build a functioning product. I think the magic is really in, and especially coming from Percolate and be on the marketing side, is like vibe selling, vibe marketing, like having that growth hack, growth mindset of like getting creative. Like for the audience, any of you that seen like I Love You Man, you know, they like two guys that like become friends and it's like this rocky start. And the fact that he like his friend like bought billboards for him of like a real estate agent. He's like, no, this is cringy. Like, why are you have my face on this billboard? It's super cheesy. But the older you get in life, you realize that those people and like the guys that do the lawyer commercials end up being pretty successful. Yeah, they're doing like Morgan and Morgan and Morgan and Morgan. I know you see those in Atlanta.
That was a great podcast episode for my first million. It was Morgan and Morgan, actually.
He's a hustler. Yeah, he's a hustler for sure. So like, what would be, Noah, maybe some lessons or some things for our audience around how to think about like, I think, which is the creative magic of being an entrepreneur going forward from here is, yeah, you can use AI for the coding stuff, but like really the magic's when you go distribute it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a bunch of different pieces here. So I'll first say like, we made the decision to start a service. We run a services business now, not a software company. Like we build software for companies. And, you know, we made that decision together because ultimately we were seeing exactly the writing on the wall that you're saying, which is like, you know, it's very hard to see how building a SaaS product can be defensible in this age, right? And I saw that the minute I started using AI. You know, I remember I thought that for the first time in 2022 when I was using GPT-3, like everything was very obviously changing in that kind of direction. You know, what we found, you know, this is one part of the answer is like, what we found is, you know, we're building a service business. There's still a lot of value, like in building software to solve your problems. Like I just talked about the tools that we've built internally for us. Those have a tremendous amount of value. I'm not trying to sell those tools to anybody else, but they have a tremendous amount of value because they've been custom built for exactly the workflow that I want to operate in. And so, you know, I think the first thing is like build the tools for yourself and for your business to operate at a scale and at a speed that wasn't possible before. Like, don't worry about whether you sell those things. Like, I think the number of people are trying to vibe code startups and then sell that software to other people. Like that is silly to me because you're like, hey, I just built this in a day. You know, it's like, I'm not trying to sell you my Whisper clone, right? Because I just built it in a day. I built it for my team. I built it as an experiment. I'll send it to Avi so we can play with it. But you know, it's like, I'm not trying to make money off that thing. You know, I learned a lot about it. So I think that's the first thing. And then, you know, I think distribution, absolutely. Marketing, creativity, all of these things. Like, you know, at the end of the day, you know, despite the fact that we might wish the world worked this way, like the best product does not always win, right? Like, you know, there's a lot of reasons that the products you see on shelves. I'm a student of the history of marketing. Like, you know, the reason you buy the toothpaste you buy is not because like you don't walk down the aisle in CVS and like turn over the back of each toothpaste and decide that you know, this is the right toothpaste for you because you read the ingredients and you made this perfectly rational choice. You recognize Colgate and Crest, and then you choose between those, or like maybe use some other brand, but probably you have Crest or Colgate in your medicine cabinet and that's what you use, and you didn't think too much about it. But those, you know, and that's the power of it. And then I think the other thing that I'm just surprised by is like, you know, everybody can't just say the same thing. Like you have to counter position a little too, right? Like if you're building something in the world, you know, I just think about it as an entrepreneur, right? I've been an entrepreneur for the last 15, 16 years. Like, you know, like ultimately you have to have a unique point of view. You have to like be able to say, why am I uniquely suited to solve this problem? And you have to be saying something that not everybody else is saying. And so the number of people who I see, like, you know, again, I live in a world where I see lots of folks at like advertising agencies doing this, where they're all now pivoting into saying they're like AI first, agentic, whatever. And I'm just like, guys, aren't you just like further commoditizing your own product by saying you're the same thing? Like, why don't you think about, if you're not really that, why don't you think about counter positioning against all the other people who are saying that by saying you're something else? And so, you know, I just, this is just kind of how the world works though. And, you know, so I think you just got to get creative. I think solve problems for yourself. You know, I do think, I mean, you guys feel it. I feel it. Like the things we can do. I mean, I said it earlier, like we raised ultimately $100 million at Percolate. Like, you know, we scaled the business really, really quickly. We're scaling revenue significantly faster at Elevic than we did at Percolate. And we're doing it with an operational team of basically one. And so, you know, and a lot of AI, a lot of tokens, but all those tokens, you know how much they cost? Like, I don't know, you know, yeah. 5-10 grand a month total. Like, you know, we're just like, it's not in the grand scheme of things. If you consider the amount that you used to need to layer on top of a business to scale it at the speed that we're scaling it, it's just like, this is a new world. And, you know, the opportunity of being an entrepreneur in this moment is to think about how you can, you know, do things that were impossible before, you know. And then the last piece I just say is like, lean into the humanity of it. Like, I think I was talking to a lawyer this morning, actually, I was having a conversation about this, and like, you know, law firms, you know, they all don't know what to do. They're buying these big, there's Harvey, there's another one. But I think, you know, ultimately the underlying thing there is like all of these different organizations, they move so far away from the like fundamentals of the relationship business and the sort of economy that comes with it. I mean, like you guys know this from working in sales, like, you know, when everybody decided that you could Zoom every sales call, all of a sudden the very best thing to do became to get on an airplane, right? Like that's just like how it works, man. Like humans, you know, still want to buy things from humans. And, you know, could that change? Maybe, I don't know, man. Like maybe it could, right? But I think, you know, maybe we'll get AGI and none of us will be needed anymore. But, you know, I'm pretty skeptical of that. And even if that were true, my bigger thing is just like, how would you change your behavior today if that is going to be true? And so, you know, that's how I think about the world, at least.
It's fascinating. So when's the next brand, your conference?
Hopefully we'll announce some dates soon. We're going to do it in October in New York City.
Amazing. All right.
We just did Ride AI, which is our autonomous vehicles event that we run. We did that a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco. That was amazing. We had a whole lineup. There were 7 self-driving cars lined up outside from all the different companies. There was a Tesla, there was a Waymo, there was a Lucid, there was a Lucid Neuro, there was a Toyota, there was the VW van that they did with. So we had everything. So Yeah, we got that going.
We got to make it next year. We
For sure.
got invited to that one last minute, and it was we were in Vegas, and then it was like too much to do. But you'll have to let us know, and we'll bring you back too. You know, before the event, and try to get some New Yorkers there for you. But thanks so much for coming on. Check out alefic.com. Amazing writing. So
and forwarddeployed.com. That's the post I just did. So I'm plugging that one.
All right, yeah. No, we'll put them all under the in the comment section for you. So.
Really good. Yeah, like the one that you sent me. Like reframing, the doom and gloom and like thinking there's be a shortage and crash, and be responsible if you're trading for sure. We're not going to recommend that, but getting the economy. I think a lot of good examples of like it's like riding a bike. The physics are weird, so you just go in and and see what the answers are.
Ride the bike. That's the advice for sure.
Yeah. You got to do it. That's when Jody was our dev for a while, and I was like, all right, let me just like try to hop in here for a little bit. And I was like, wait, I can do this. This is not that hard. So
everyone needs to.
It's obvi proof. You guys can all do it. So, no, thanks so much for coming on, Noah. Always a pleasure, man. And definitely we'll bring you back on anytime you want.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. And we will end before we jump with our friends at Arch. So you held through the bear market. We just spoke with Arch at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas, and a lot of exciting things going on. They have some cool ideas, some cool strategies around STRC, which is the hot product from Strategy, and who just reported earnings yesterday. And a lot of the focus is around STRC. People that hold Bitcoin, one interesting thing, not financial advice, is borrowing against your Bitcoin and putting it in something like STRC. Arch has rates at 8.5%, or starting at 8.5%, and then put that in STRC, get 11.5%, and make the 3% net interest margin. Kind of funny. I always bring this up. I always bring that use case up, but it's the one that seems, talking to people face to face in Vegas, even from Oregon, small town where I live, they're the most interested in learning about this stuff. So we'll keep you guys posted on this, and then also might do like a how-to video on both keeping that exposure, long Bitcoin, while also getting, a little carry from the net interest margin if you do qualify.
Get Mark Moss on here because they're new. This is really cool. Their Bitcoin perpetual income strategy. So it's not just lending now. They also have a few other products now with Tax Shield, perpetual income. So if you're sitting on a bunch of Bitcoin, you can then get continued cash flow on that as well without capital gains. So huge friends of the pod. We love them. It was great seeing them in Vegas, as you mentioned. And we have 2 podcasts coming out with them as well, with the 2 co-founders. So that should be exciting coming up. But we'll be back here tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern. So make sure to tell your friends. We are creating a community. We also have a Telegram group. I'm going to post that later on our Twitter handle. So Daily Stack HQ is our Twitter. We have a Telegram group. So if you want to get involved or ask questions ahead of these podcasts, like that's your opportunity. We'll take questions from our group, and we're super excited about moving forward. So
yeah. Also merch we've been rolling out with, not like we're not even selling merch. We're just like, we're wearing merch, and the Telegram community, gets merch first. Also, they get free drink tickets when we have events. So there's a few things we have cooking up for the people, for the plebs. And we also want to start bringing more plebs on the show. So jump in. Obviously going to link it. And then we'll see you guys tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern.
Happy trading.